Good morning, everyone. Good morning, industry partners and small businesses. Welcome to the NAVAIR Office of Small Business Programs webinar series entitled SBIR STTR. Thank you all for joining us on this fine Wednesday morning and joining us for this very informational webinar series that we put together for you all. Just a couple housekeeping notes. So there is no chat feature. However, there is a Q&A feature. So please, we strongly suggest and urge you to put all your questions in the Q&A. There is no right or wrong question. There's no dumb question except the question that's not asked. So please feel free to submit some questions to us. We are here to help. So with that, and without further ado, I would like to turn this over to our Deputy Director for the Office of Small Business Programs at NAVAIR, Mr. Shelby Butler. Over to you, Mr. Butler.
Good morning, small businesses! Thank you all for joining us at today's event presented by NAVAIR. It is my pleasure to welcome you to an overview of the Small Business Innovative Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs. Our goal is to prepare your company to be defense industrial base ready. In order to achieve that goal, it will take persistence, doing your homework, patience, dedication, performance, the right capabilities matched with the right requirements, and perseverance. Next slide. Our command focuses its energy on our sailors and Marines. Since its inception, NAVAIR's goal has been to provide full life cycle support of naval aviation aircraft, weapons, and systems operated by sailors and Marines. This includes research, design, development, systems engineering, acquisition, test and evaluation, training facilities and equipment, repair and modification, and in-service engineering and logistics support. We rely on our team members, civilian, military, and industry partners to adhere to these principles and provide our sailors and Marines with the latest technology and the ability to sustain legacy systems, weapons, and aircraft. Next slide. Our role in naval aviation is very clear. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I would have told you that this is a near peer situation with our competitors, but we are now dealing with at pace challenges from Russia, China, and others. Therefore, we have to increase our innovation and productivity in the areas that support the aircraft and our weapon systems. A huge part of that involves acquiring the applicable data to make informed decisions regarding cost, schedule, and performance. We also are focused on increasing the Navy and Marine Corps' capabilities, readiness, and affordability. Next slide. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Miss Christy Wigman, who is currently the NAVAIR SBIR STTR Program Manager. Ms. Wigman became the Program Manager of NAVAIR's Small Business Innovative Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program in February of 2022. In this position, Ms. Wigman is responsible for the management and implementation of DoD, Navy, and command policy aimed at stimulating innovation, technology development, and the successful transition of SBIR, STTR, science and technology research, and products into the naval aviation enterprise. Previously, Ms. Wigman managed the Naval Innovation Research and Engineering Program and worked as an intelligence analyst for the S&T Intelligence Liaison Office. Ms. Wigman received her bachelor's degree in global business and public policy from the University of Maryland and has also completed the Fleet Seminar Program through the Naval War College. It is also my pleasure to introduce our co-speaker, Mr. Tony Archer, who is currently the Naval Air Systems Command Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer Portfolio Manager. He is directly responsible for the planning, execution, and processes of the two programs. Mr. Archer received his baccalaureate degree from the University of Florida, where he majored in aerospace engineering. He also earned a master's degree in aviation systems engineering from the University of Tennessee and is a graduate of the United States Naval Test Pilot School. Mr. Archer joined the Marine Corps in 1979, where he held numerous billet assignments, including squadron pilot, battalion air officer, the H-53 test pilot, and squadron operations officer. After retiring from the Marine Corps in 2005, he spent 3 years as a program manager with Viasat Incorporated, managing the design, development, and installation of ground-based Earth stations. In 2008, Mr. Archer returned to NAVAIR and has held the positions of H-53 Platform Coordinator, Mission Systems Test and Evaluation Branch Head for Integrated Communication Systems, and most recently, his current position as SBIR STTR Portfolio Manager within the NOC AD Chief Technology and Strategic Operations Office. Without further ado, I give you Mr. Tony Archer and Miss Christy Wigman. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Mr. Butler. Looking forward to getting started with this brief. As Mr. Butler mentioned, I am Christy Wigman. I am the program manager for the NAVAIR SBIR STTR program, and joined today by our technical lead, Mr. Tony Archer. So moving right along, we'll be giving you an overview today of our program, as well as letting you know some of the benefits of participating in the overall Navy family of SBIR STTR programs. So to start off, just a quick introduction on what these programs are. SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research Program, and STTR is a little bit more of a creative acronym. It is the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. And basically the main difference between these programs is that the first involves just the small business, and the second requires that the small business must partner with a research institution. This can be a university, a nonprofit institution, or a contractor operated federally funded research and development center. This is a highly competitive program. It does have a 3-phased award system, which Mr. Archer will be talking about later on. And the important thing to know is this is the primary vehicle through which DoD funds small companies to perform innovative research and R&D projects. Small businesses are a very important part of our industry base in order to meet those threats and equip tomorrow's fleet with technological advantage, especially in this environment that Mr. Butler referred to. Moving forward, the purpose of the program, there are several purposes. Not only is the program meant to stimulate technological innovation and use small businesses to meet those federal R&D needs, but also we have a goal to foster and encourage participation by socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. And we also have a goal to increase private sector commercialization of these technologies as well, because we do see that that increases competition and promotes economic growth in the areas that we are interested in. In order to be eligible as a small business to participate in SBIR and STTR, you do have to have less than 500 employees, be independently owned and operated, organized for profit, and your principal place of business must be in the United States. For SBIRs, the small businesses must perform at least 2/3 of the research in phase 1 and half of the research or work in phase 2. For STTR, the small businesses must perform 40% of that research, and the research institution must perform at least 1/3 of that work. The primary employment for your principal investigator must be with the small business, which means at least half of his time, and all of the research and development work must be performed in the United States. The program, I'm not going to go too in depth on the law and the policy behind the program. It just is important to know that it is a congressional program that is authorized by Congress. And if you've been following the program for this last year, you will know that we do have good news to share that the program has been reauthorized through FY25. The program has been going continuously since 1982, but we do have to be reauthorized by Congress every few years. But we did receive that reauthorization just recently, so we're good to go for the next 3 years, and we imagine well beyond that. But it is important to know that there are a lot of policy directives and different information for you to be aware of when you are working on the program, and we provide you with the links and all of the information that you need for that. Over to Mr. Archer to talk about some more details on how the program works through the phases.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Wigman, and thank you, Mr. Butler, for that wonderful introduction. And certainly thank you to your office for getting this all set up together. It's a great opportunity for our office, and it's also a great opportunity for us to get this information out in really a very digestible manner. So on slide number 7, I'm having a little latency here with the slides, but if you'll follow along, what I'm really going to talk about in the next 3 slides is kind of the nuts and bolts of how the SBIR and STTR program works. I would say 90% of what I'm going to talk about is how the Navy executes the program, as well as the other DoD agencies. However, there are some slight nuances to it, and I will try to point those out as I go through. So on slide 7, if you'll follow along with me, start in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the block that says the agencies will release topics via a broad agency announcement. And that's really how we engage with industry, right? So 3 times a year, the DoD and the Navy will go ahead and release a BAA. Typically here at NAVAIR, we only participate in 2 of those. So with the .1 and A, and also the .2 and B are the ones we typically do. So those, you can look for those to be pre-released usually in November of every year, and also in April of every year. So the BAA will go ahead and detail all the processes for the small business to submit their proposals for the topics that we'll publish, and I'll talk a little bit about how that process works. But they're very detailed, so they'll tell you what the page count is, give you places where you'll have to go sign up, and for like SAM, which is the System for Awards Management, it'll tell you the length of proposal, even everything down to the font. So when you get the BAA and you're going through it, you want to be very careful that you're following the directions that are in that broad agency announcement. Okay, so what the BAA does is it solicits proposals from industry, from the small businesses that we will evaluate that answer the topics. So in our in NAVAIR and our SYSCOM, our phase 1 proposals are evaluated by 3 subject matter experts, evaluators who either have a specific knowledge of the technology we're looking for, or they may know something about how we want to use the technology and what we want to use it for in the aircraft, the weapon system, or the lab. And then in those blue blocks going across that next row, and this is also detailed very, very carefully in the BAA, it'll tell you how we're going to evaluate your proposal. So the biggest thing we evaluate the proposals on is the technical merit and the degree of innovation. Those are the single biggest things that we are looking for when our teams evaluate a phase 1 proposal. And then we're also looking at the qualifications of the folks that you are proposing to do the work. So you're a principal investigator. Are there any other key people? We're looking for academic credentials, experience, those things, kind of, basically, resume type of stuff. And then the last thing that we're evaluating your proposals on is the future market potential. We usually use the word commercialization. Is there another market besides NAVAIR or the Navy that your technology would benefit? Okay, so at that point, it says the small businesses receive awards and then begin the three-phase program. So fill in the blanks a little bit there. So in that BAA, it's going to tell you when your proposals are due. So that will be the BAA close. Once we get those proposals, our office by law has 90 days to do the evaluations and make the notification to all the firms that proposed, whether they were selected or not selected for an award. And then typically we strive to have the awards made 30 days after that. So really a very quick process. So from BAA close to award to those successful offerers, we're looking at 4 months. Okay, so at that point, those firms will start the phase 1 process. So down here on the left, as the arrow's going down to the phase 1 concept phase, this is basically looking for a feasibility study that your firm will do over 6 months. That's going to involve a kickoff meeting, actually meeting with the technical team. Often on that technical team on the government side is the topic author. And so they're going to kind of just fill in some of those gaps that were, you need to move forward from the proposal and the topics part of the process. And so during that time, you'll submit a progress report and then a final report. Now, for firms that want to be considered at the end of that 6 months, all our phase 1s here at NAVAIR, the base period is 6 months long. And at the end of that 6 months, you have to submit your final report, but you are also encouraged and may submit an initial phase 2 proposal into the same site. And this is all outlined in the BAA and your contract, so that you can be considered for a phase 2 award. So from the phase 1s, we are going to do the firms that were selected for phase 1. We're going to bring back that technical team. They're going to review how things went over that 6-month base period. We're going to look at your final report and what the firm is proposing to do should they get a phase 2 invitation. And so once that's done, we down select typically to one firm, and then we will do a phase 2 award, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. But at that point, now you're looking at 24 to 36 months. The award's going to be around $1 million, and really that's where the meat of the research and development work is going to be performed. And we're really at that end of that looking for a prototype or something we can test, demonstrate, or experiment, so that at the end of that time, our program office, program managers, and a technical team can make a decision on where we want to go forward. And eventually where we're trying to get to is phase 3, where we're actually transitioning your technology into the aircraft, the weapon system, or the laboratory. So one couple of the key things about phase 3. So no SBIR funds are used at this point. So up to now, we've been using either mostly SBIR funds, maybe mixed in with a little program office funds, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But in phase 3, it has to be all program office dollars. The law does not allow us to use any SBIR or STTR funds to support the phase 3. Phase 3 brings a lot of great things with it. The government now can do a directed award right to your firm because the competition's already been satisfied. Should your company have either grown or been acquired because you were so successful and now it's no longer qualifies as a small business, the government is still, the law allows us to still reach in and make a procurement despite the SBA size standards may no longer be applicable for small business. There's no limit on the dollar size of the phase 3 procurement, and you can have the right to receive subcons for phase 3 work using the directed award. Okay, now moving to the next slide. Some of this information was presented on the previous one, but I think this really gives a great one-page look at how the program works, and there are a couple of things that are specific to NAVAIR here. So if you start on the left, phase 1 is the feasibility period, right? So we're looking during that phase 1 base, $140,000, 6 months. we're looking for a progress report, the kickoff meeting, and your final report. For firms that are selected, and so typically here at NAVAIR, we do three awards. So the 3 companies will get a phase 1 award per topic. So that's why we have this period where we have to go back and evaluate how the 3 firms did and make that down select for the phase 2. So only the firm that gets selected to go to phase 2 gets that phase 1 option, which is another 6 months. It's another $100,000. The intent there is that to keep working on the work you did in the phase 1, keep your team together, and during that time, you're working with the government technical team to develop your full phase 2 proposal. So at the end of the phase 1 base, we asked for an initial phase 2 proposal, but now we really want to flesh it out. And the reason we do this is because the government, at least here at NAVAIR, and I think most of the Navy, we're not going to do a statement of work, right? In order to get you that phase 2 award as quickly as possible, we don't do the whole process where we give a SOW and then we get a proposal back. We're going to work together collaboratively, government and industry, on putting your phase 2 proposal together, and then we're going to get that off the contracts and try to get the phase 2 award done as quickly as possible. Our goal is that you get that phase 2 award by the time that phase 1 option is ending or shortly thereafter. Okay, our phase 2 awards typically are about $1 million, and we almost always have an option in there for about $300,000. There's a little bit flexibility in there, but not too much, because we need to use numbers in order to plan our budgets. But that's something you'll work with your technical team on, you'll work with the people in our program office on, and those contracts are typically going to be cost plus fixed fee. So what we're looking for, unlike back in phase 1 where that was firm fixed price, we're going to do a cost plus fixed fee award for phase 2. And one thing that I would like you to note is that it's going to get a cost plus fixed fee with the government, you're going to have a DCAA audit or a DCAA approved accounting system. Okay, now we've gone through the phase 2. And we're going to go see how things are going. If everything was going pretty well, your technical person for the government side is going to come back to our office and go, hey, we'd like to execute the option. Things are going great. So then we'll execute the option and get another 6 to 12 months of work, another $300,000. And what we're really pushing nowadays in our office is we're trying to get our technical folks and the firms to put some kind of event in there, or at least a wedge for an event, so that we can do some sort of evaluation, whether it's a demonstration, a test, or an experiment. So something that we can have a deliverable that we can give to the program office and give them a report, right? Something they can move out on. And so, and then at that point, then we've got this blue block, and then this is maybe where we here at NAVAIR do some things a little bit differently, using all the same law that's available to everyone else, but we execute things a little bit differently. So at that point, we're going to see where is the technology, where is the platform or the weapon system that we're hoping to integrate it. Oftentimes they haven't merely, in a perfect world, they're syncing up and we're moving together, but that doesn't always happen. So here's where we have a couple of tools, contracting tools that we can use. We can either expand the work on the original phase 2 award, or we can do an enhancement, which is SBIR money and some program office money, or depending on the priority. So if it's a very high priority project, then we may even award that phase 2.5. That's kind of a NAVAIRism, if you will. So really what that is to you, it's another phase 2 award. And so we use these tools to help the CRP, which is Commercialization Readiness Program, some strategies that we have to take successful technologies and just, this is right here, if you've heard of it, the Valley of Death. This is what we do to get across that valley to get us and you as a team over to phase 3. Okay, and then I will go to the next slide. And really, this slide just gives you a snapshot of how we kind of do things here. This is the the behind this curtain kind of work we do here. So I apologize, we don't have our FY22 numbers. You know, that FY22 just ended. We don't have anything rolled up, but this gives you an idea of kind of the scope of our budget. You can see that for 21, we had about $113 million for SBIR and just over 16 million for STTR. One thing I'd like to point out, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, this goes to kind of how we select our topics. So, if, you know, a couple of slides ago, I kind of said, hey, we put some topics in the BAA and we often start the process. But here, at least at NAVAIR, one thing you can know that at NAVAIR, when you submit to a topic, that there is, at that time, there was a requirement in NAVAIR for that technology. So for 21, you can see that there was 147 topics were submitted, and those topics are submitted by our scientists and engineers across the whole NAVAIR enterprise, those folks who are in the program offices or they're in the competencies, but they're the ones who are closest to the problem, and they're doing, you know, the blocking and tackling and the knife fighting to try to get the technologies out to the fleet. So they submit these topic ideas, and then you can see that it goes through a process, right? It goes through the PMA, which is a programmatic process, like, hey, is this something that is on our programmatic roadmap? And so it gets vetted there, and then it gets actually what's something we don't show. There's a technical evaluation process to see if this topic, while it might be a great idea, is it technically viable? So it goes through a process there. And then it gets ranked even by our program executive office, just because they look across PMAs that are in their portfolio, and maybe this has other applications or there's somewhere else there's another need, and so they team together and work, and then so eventually there's a final selection made. So you can see that even here it's a very competitive process for a topic author at a program office to get their topic into the BAA. And then you can see typically, like for that year, we had actually made, so we had 46 and 9, 55 topics altogether between SBIR and STTR. And you can see over on the left there, we made 212 phase 1 awards. So that year, we made a little bit more than the 3 awards per topic. We made almost 4, it looks like. So the odds, we just don't pick one person, right, or one company for each topic. We typically pick 3, keeping that competition going, and so that we can down select for the phase 2 later on. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Wakeman. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Archer explained to you a little bit about our process for how we select the topics that go forward. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is what are the areas that you can expect those topics to be in specifically for NAVAIR. So our investment priorities are focused on developing capabilities that improved aircraft availability, increase lethality, and support our next generation of platforms. So I'll just kind of hit some high points here on the types of technologies that we are looking for. We want to improve readiness, and in order to do that, we need to understand how and when our components are going to degrade and develop fast and flexible repairs. So this means investing in new and improved inspection techniques and agile repair capabilities, particularly for composites. And also this means incorporating AI into our maintenance environment and our supply chain. For increasing lethality, we need to rely not only on improving the range and endurance of our aircraft and our weapons, but also in integrating and protecting our networks in a distributed maritime operations environment. This way we can be more effective, increase our standoff range, and stay out of the weapons engagement zone. We also need to invest in non-RF comms like free space optics and lasers so that we can own the RF spectrum and deny access to our adversaries. Finally, we want to bring all of these technologies together in order to ensure that our air wing of the future is more capable and survivable in a contested environment. In particular, this means investing in the technologies that will allow for future manned-unmanned teaming and new flexible concepts for deploying sensors and weapons. On the next slide, I'll go ahead and just show you, this is a little bit more exhaustive list of our research areas of interest. Not going to read all of these to you, but you will get a copy of these slides afterwards. I did see that question come up a few times. Not only will you get a copy of the slide deck, but the webinar itself will be, the recording will be posted. So do take some time to go through these research areas of interest and understand, you know, the broad categories we have here are the enabling technologies that we need, particularly AI, materials, quantum, the technologies that we're looking for in order to perform warfighter performance, training, human system design, personal protective equipment, the technologies that we need to improve readiness and sustainment, preventing corrosion, supply chain management, and then finally improving warfighting capability. So everything from command, control, and communications to aircraft countermeasures and hypersonics. If there's something you see on this slide that your company can provide, most likely you will see a topic come out at some point that speaks to that area. So with that, back over to Mr. Archer to talk about the STP program.
Thanks, Ms. Wigman. So STP program, the SBIR STTR transition programs, super great program. So happy to be able to brief this slide. So this is a program that is sponsored by the Navy. Some of the other agencies may have something similar to it, but this is ours. And what it really is focused to is phase 2 firms. And not limited to, but especially maybe a firm that's got their first phase 2 at the Navy. And so what it is it's a program that helps you come along as a small business and maybe more importantly, and an even bigger hurdle, to learn how to work with the Navy, right? So it's an 11-month program, and typically I believe they send out the invitations to all the candidate phase 2 awardees in the Navy to be invited, and then in April or May they hold an event in which they kind of give you some information, and then you get to make the decision if you want to participate or not. So let you know right now there is some work that is needed to be done by the firm. So I think they have like a monthly class or a webinar kind of like this, and they will pick a subject, you know, on what to do, like maybe, you know, how to learn how to speak Navy or how to produce a quad chart. All those things that a firm would need to know to kind of learn how to do business with the Navy. And so, you know, there's mentoring, there's education, there's networking opportunities. They teach about how to mentor with prime contractors, because oftentimes that's how the technology is transitioned into our platforms and our weapon systems and our labs is through one of our primes. It teaches how to do market research, how to find leads for other opportunities. And then the biggest thing that I think is it gives you access to having your technology and telling the story that you want to tell out on this virtual transition marketplace, which is kind of a showcase for government and private sector, where it's an open site and everything that goes up there gets reviewed. So for NAVAIR, I review everything. It's review the tech talk, a quad chart, thumbnail, just some information that's put up to the site, and then others can research it and see what you're working on with the Navy, and our program offices and our program managers can also look at it. And then that culminates, the 11th month program culminates with you being invited to a forum for SBIR transition event, which is where you get to go to like SYSCOMS Space or AFCEA West, if you're familiar with that. And this March, NAVAIR and NAVSEA are holding a combined event. So I think it's the 14th to the 16th of March. We're going to have our FST event with the NAVSEA in DC. And those events, you know, SYSCOMS Space or West, or our event that we're going to have, right, they are, you know, people come by who are industry, government, right? This is an opportunity for you to talk to folks and people who are especially interested in, you know, military technology and especially your technology. And then if you go to the next slide for me, Ms. Wigman, you can see that bottom bullet says that the average commercialization rate is 17% higher for firms that have participated in this program over firms that have not. And so, you know, that statistic is a little misleading actually on the low side, right? So the 17% out of 100, but if you look in 2017, for instance, 3 times as many companies that participated commercialized their technology than didn't. So it's a great program. I work on parts of it, you know, for 4 to 6 months a year, and I'm always very excited to go to the FST events and meet the small businesses. So for instance, this year we have 51 of our companies are participating in it. So I think probably 80 to 90% of our firms choose to participate in this. All right, and next slide, please. I think I have one more thing to talk about. Yes, so and again, this is another program that is funded by Navy. This one really exciting, new, right? You saw that STP was 22 years been going on. This one is just 3 years old. So the Navy has stood up an SBIR STTR experimentation cell, right? So they have put together a team of about 8 to 10 folks who are all military experience and have experience in the experimentation and the test and evaluation community. And their goal is to help facilitate the small businesses in the Navy to get their technology typically onto a ship, right, into our environments, right? They provide venues, they help provide venues, they help provide when those venues are going to happen, access into those venues, and then their strong suit is to help you do all those things that it takes to get on the base, get on the ship, right? You just can't bring, you'd be surprised, but you just can't bring your laptop on an airplane and use it. It has to go through a certification process. You can't bring certain type of batteries onto the ship, right? Because they, you know, everyone knows lithium batteries or whatever, but so they know all this. And so they help facilitate this, and they make, you know, they give you the highway so that you don't have to spend your time learning all that. They do that, and you can concentrate on your technology. And then what that does is that helps get your technology in the hands of the end user in the environment. We get a report, or we get a video, and then we take that back to the program office and can say, see, look, this is great. You know, let's take the next step forward. So yeah, so the website is there. Please go take a look at that. There's great information in there. They've published several books or guides actually that you can download and take a look at, and just learn about how to deal and work with the Navy going forward, whether it's, you know, aviation, surface, or subsurface. Okay, back to you, Ms. Wigman. Thank you.
Thanks. Did just want to take a moment to talk about the Navy Launch Program as well. This is a new program. It just completed its first pilot year. So it's now in its first official year of operation being offered to our current phase 2 companies. And so this is not meant to replace the STP program that Tony talked about. It's meant to complement it. It has a little bit of a different focus. As we've mentioned a couple times, SBIR and STTR technologies are meant to be dual use. Obviously, we want them to transition into the defense market, but we also encourage the commercialization of these technologies outside of the defense market for all the reasons we talked about before, that it increases overall innovation and competition, and ultimately increases the funding to advance these technologies to where we want them to be. So that is a second goal of the SBIR program. And for that reason, the Navy did decide to set up this program to specifically help small businesses understand the commercial markets that are outside of the traditional defense market. You can participate in both this program and the STP program. As I said, they're meant to complement each other, and they are available to all NAVAIR phase 2 companies. This one you do have to apply to be in. It is a 10-month program, and it's meant to educate, accelerate, and scale beyond those traditional markets that you may be used to. It does use an advisor-led approach. All of the advisors are entrepreneurs who have a long history of starting their own businesses, having successful businesses, having failed businesses, and having learned those lessons along the way. They'll work with you to help prioritize your markets, help you explore private funding options, help you discover new customers and figure out ways to grow your company and grow your technology. This is done through a series of workshops, but also one-on-one mentoring where they'll help you work on a commercialization strategy and help you navigate things like licensing or identifying venture capital funding. It's really based on your company and your technology. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's very customized to what you need. Also, once you complete the program, it's not just 10 months and you're done. You will also continue to be able to get ongoing support from those advisors and also be given the opportunity to join an alumni community where you can network with the advisors and with the other companies that have been part of that program to continue beyond just the initial 10 months. So this program, the experimentation cell, and also the STP program are just great sources that we have as being one of the Navy SBIR STTR companies. And the main thing we wanted you to know is that we do have those available to all of our NAVAIR companies, and it's just additional resources and tools that we're able to pull down to help you be successful. And back to Mr. Archer to talk generally about some of the other transition practices we have, and then specifically NAVAIR, how our commercialization program works.
Thank you, Ms. Wigman. Yeah, so those prior slides talked about our programs for transition. And so, this is, again, a little bit more like how we do it. So we have some things that the law allows us to do. And so one of those is that we can do a reach back, is what we call it. So if there was a previous Navy SBIR where the investment stopped or there was a, maybe the technology wasn't ready, the state of the art wasn't quite there, or perhaps the timing wasn't right for the program office, we have the ability to go back and reactivate, if you will, and fund that topic. And another thing we use often is the law does allow us to do a second phase 2. So there are some differences in the law of what we could do prior to FY13, and others of what we can do after FY13. But again, the point being that there's no other competition or no one else has to be approval, that we can do that all here at NAVAIR and at the Navy. Another thing we can do is across agency determination, cross-agency award. So if, for example, Air Force is a good one here, example for NAVAIR, because they have airplanes and we have airplanes. So say a topic was an Air Force topic, went through a phase 1, maybe went through a phase 2, but then they had some issues. Maybe their program office wasn't ready, and our technical teams or our program offices become knowledgeable of it. Then we can go ahead and ask that agency if we can make a phase 2 award to that, and they typically will approve that. The one thing about that is it has to go through the SBA and through the other agency to get approval. Some things we do here too, and I talked about that on that slide that had the big blue box, that was CRP, is matching funds and enhancements. So the biggest commitment that we can get here in the program in the SBIR program office from a platform program office is if they're willing to put some money into the effort. So those raised to the top, we'll match that funding here in the SBIR office, and we'll make that typically a second phase 2 award there. And then finally is command transition support team. So each SYSCOM does this a little differently. The technology managers here at NAVAIR sit inside the program offices for the most part. At NAVC, for instance, they sit in the PAOs. But So those folks are great to help transition. But again, your TPOC is also one of the key people to help transition your technology, and of course, the small business itself. Okay, Christy, if you can hear me, next slide.
It's switched, Tony.
Oh.
I'm not sure if there's a lag, but I did.
Okay.
I did it.
Okay, I got it, I think. And then the commercialization readiness program. So that's how we do a lot of our transition efforts, is in that program. We have the in-cycle phase 1 and phase 2 events, and those run, and we do those 2 times a year. Anything that's going to be over and above, and a lot of the things that I've talked about, and Ms. Wigman talked about, as far as getting across that valley of death, or the second phase 2s, or the slide that I just briefed, is really done in our commercialization readiness program. So this is a program that is actually in the law, and every agency and organization that participates in the SBIR STTR program has to have, like, 1% of their funding has to be dedicated to the administration of this program, but leaves it up to really that program to determine how much they're going to fund it. And so, here at NAVAIR, that's gone back and forth, but lately we've really kind of wanting to, reinforce the winners, exploit success. So we've been putting more money into this interim technology maturity phase, where we can get those phase 1 and phase 2 efforts across the valley of death and into that platform, that weapon system, or that lab. So almost always, I would say exclusively, has to have a PMA requirement, has to match that technology. Typically, we're going to accelerate that technology and get it into that weapon system, a program of record, using the SBIR STTR funds in the program office as a vehicle to do risk mitigation. The program, since they're all dealing exclusively with these transition efforts, there's really good coordination between the PMA and the SBIR technical team and our office, so that they're fully engaged. So we have 3 people in our office. That's really all they do is CRP. And it provides assistance to the SBIR firms to help them get their technology in the program of record. So the one thing I want to stress, that's in that banner below, it says there is no application. So it's really a pull. It's a technology pull from our program offices, but you're working closely with your TPOC, right? Is really a way for you to stay engaged. Talk to them about it. Hey, ask, has the roadmaps changed? Are we still on track? Are the requirements still what we thought they were 3 years ago? And keeping them engaged and excited, and it will help get your technology, hopefully at least a candidate for this program. It's another one of those programs that we do internally, and again, it's competitive. So we typically, have more than we can fund. So, but it's a great program, and it's enjoyed a lot of success lately. Back over to you, Ms. Wigman.
Sorry, last.
Oh, is that mine? Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't switch. And so this is just a foot stomper, right? This is a foot stomper that shows you really how successful we have been, right? Just not NAVAIR, so this is a Navy number, Navy-wide number, $10.6 billion in commercialization transition successes over more than 20 years. And then if you like, you can go to the website that's there, and you can see examples of what we've transitioned. The topics, the dollar amounts are there, and it kind of gives you a brief history of how it started and how it ended up. And that's one thing that's very interesting about the small business technology, is that sometimes the technology ends up not exactly the way that it was started, but But you can see all those success stories there at that website. Okay, now over to you, Ms. Wigman.
Thanks, Mr. Archer. All right, moving on, we'll go ahead and just go over some sites that can help you as you get started with figuring out how to participate in the program. So the first site that we wanted to talk about is NavySBIR.com. This is the official site for the Navy program. It'll include all of the information on those BAAs. This is where you will see information on the topics that are coming out, selections that have been made, specifics about the programs for all of the Navy programs. You can find those success stories that Mr. Archer was just talking about. You can also find out outreach events that we're attending and find points of contact for each SYSCOM. The second site that I highly recommend you take some time to look through is NavySBIRsearch.com. So this has information on all past topics and awards, but it's really good to go out and look to get a handle on what are the things that we have advertised previously, so that you can get a sense of which SYSCOM in the Navy is most likely going to have the type of work that you're looking for. Obviously, we hope it's us, NAVAIR, but if you have technologies that you think might be more appropriate for NAVC or the Marine Corps or NAVWAR, this is where you can also go out and find information about their previous awards and topics to get a sense of where you fit in the Navy. The third site is DefenseSBIRSTTR.com. This brings it up even a higher level. So this is now looking at the DoD-wide SBIR STTR program. You can find information out here about the Army, about the Air Force, and this is also where you'll find the innovation portal that you will use to submit a proposal if you're responding to a Navy topic as well. So another really good site to be familiar with. And then if you're looking for information even a level above that, SBIR.gov is where you'll find information on all of the federal-wide SBIR STTR programs. It's not just a DoD program. There are other programs, the National Institute of Health, Department of Education, Department of Energy. All of these federal agencies have SBIR STTR programs. So if you're interested in looking even broader than DoD, this is a great place to go to get links to all of those programs, find information, and get that program-wide policy information that we talked about earlier. Finally, NavySTP.com. This is the site for that SBIR STTR transition program that Mr. Archer talked about. And this is where you can find information on that program, the business mentoring and training and marketing that they do, and especially find out information about their government and industry events that they hold. Many of those we are at, and it's just a good site for you to have. Finally, I know this has been a lot of information, but to just give you some specifics on how to get started if you have not participated in SBIR before, we recommend, these 4 steps in getting yourself there. First, going to that SBIR.gov site to determine if your company is eligible. Then going to that DoD SBIR STTR site to research topics that are consistent with your business strategies and the technologies that you are interested in developing. And then also looking into the BAA, taking some time and to read and understand that broad agency announcement and the component specific instructions associated with that BAA to make sure you're very familiar with them and understand them before you participate. And then finally looking at that DSIP site, using the templates that are instructed and being able to find what you need to do to submit a proposal if you find a topic that you think you can meet the need of. NAVAIR is participating in the next BAA, the 23.1 and 23.A BAAs. That is coming out. There will be a pre-release on the 22nd of November. And then it'll officially open for proposal submission on the 4th of January, and it'll close, which means your proposals have to be submitted by the 9th of February. And again, this DoD SBIR STTR.mil is where you will find that DSIP link to submit your proposals. We also recommend that you follow the Navy SBIR STTR programs on social media. So they do have a LinkedIn, Twitter, and then also you have a generic email there for our program, navair.sbir@navy.mil, if you have any questions that we can answer for you. But following on social media is a great way to find out about when we are going to have topics released, or if there's any events we're holding, or just any information that we or the Navy wants to get out to our small business community that can help you along the way. And with that, I believe we have some time for questions, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Butler for some final comments.
Wow, what a great presentation. I would sincerely like to thank Ms. Christy Wigman and Mr. Tony Archer for the plethora of information that they provided on the SBIR and STTR programs. So where do we go from here? Great question. Our goal is to best prepare your company for future opportunities. Therefore, in addition to the speaker's contact information provided, we ask that you contact NAVAIR OSBP to schedule your personalized and in-depth industry one-on-one meeting. Lastly, ensure that you give us your feedback by completing our survey. We really want to hear from you. And now, we solicit questions from the audience. I will remind you to like or give a thumbs up to the questions that you are most interested in us answering during this webinar, so that we can give those questions a higher priority. All of the questions we will answer at another time and then provide them to the distro list. So with that, over to you, Mr. Brown, for questions.
All right, thanks, Mr. Butler. So I've tried to preload a couple of the popular questions here for Ms. Wigman and Mr. Archer. So if you're cool with it, I'm just going to go in order of most liked. Starting with this question, can industry submit a topic directly to your office for consideration, or must it come from a government organization? Ms. Wigman, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, I can take that one. We do have to have the topics from a government point of contact. So industry cannot submit them directly. They do have to come from a government point of contact. And there have also been some in the last reauthorization that came out, there was a very specific inclusion in that said we do have to work to make sure that our topics are not being directly written by industry. So still not sure exactly what the final policy on that is going to look like, but it does look like there is some intent from Congress to limit that. However, we are able to get them directly from the government POCs. They do require that government sponsor in order for us to consider and publish them.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, another very highly liked question here. Is there a maximum number of phase 2 contracts that can be awarded? So the timeline showed 2 phase 2 stages, but perhaps that cycle could continue iterating. Sorry, Teams keeps updating and I'm losing my question. So does a reach back phase 2 allow for a third phase 2 funding cycle? And we'll send this one over to Mr. Archer.
Thanks, Mr. Brown. So the answer is sometimes. So the law changed and was effective in FY13. So prior to FY13, so and it relates to the topic. So say the topic was a, in fiscal year 10 or 11 or 12, for instance, the law at that time was that you could do more than to phase two. So you could have a third phase two, as long as you did not exceed the dollar value that whatever it was at the time. It goes up every year, kind of. The maximum dollar value goes up with inflation, and anything over that has to be approved by the Small Business Administration. And in 13, the law changed, so any topics that are FY13 and or after, and you can notice that by the Air Force, the Navy, Army all do the same thing, that the first couple of digits will be the year. They are limited to phase twos. So if it's a recent topic, say within the last 8 or 9 years, then we can only do two. Now there is one caveat in the policy directive, so that does allow something called a third phase two. It's called a phase 2B, but to get a phase 2B or a third phase two, then there has to be matching money that's not really federal government money. So it can't be SBIR funding. It can't be even from the program office. Usually that funding comes either from venture capital or can come from the states. Hopefully I answered your question. Over.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Archer. Okay, this next one we'll shoot over to Ms. Wigman. Is the Navy considering open topics and direct to phase two open topics? I assume that they mean in the next BA.
Okay. We don't have any open topics coming up in 23. So we are participating in 23.1.A and 23.2.B. We do have some direct to phase two topics, but not open topics. So while we don't have any coming up that we have planned for our FY 2023 BAAs, it is something that we are considering doing and we have been talking about. And so you may see one potentially come out in our 24 BAA. So it is something that we're considering, although we don't have any immediate plans for that.
Thank you very much. And this next one seems very appropriate for Mr. Archer. What is the interplay between NAVAIR and MARC or SYSCOM?
Oh, well, that's a good one. So it's not as much as you would think. There's some, obviously, the Marine Corps aircraft and their program offices are in NAVAIR. So we transition our technologies and we get our SBIR efforts to the Marine Corps aviation side of the house that way. So the Marine Corps does have its own SBIR STTR program that is part of the Navy. It seems like they do a lot of the stuff on the ground side, and so since we do air side, there's not as much. We typically end up partnering and having interaction with NAVC because our aircraft land on their ships, or we have partnerships where we've done efforts together with the Air Force, mostly on kind of air crew equipment, because they've got airplanes, we got airplanes, and so our air crews kind of get the same. We worked on efforts for cold weather boots and some life rafts and some stuff like that. But with the MARC or SYSCOM SBIR STTR team, there just isn't been a lot, at least in the last 5 years that I've been here. Over.
Thank you, sir. All right, next one I'm going to send over to Ms. Wigman. So I saw a couple of questions, different variations of the same question. So the question I'm going to ask is what type of clearance is required for our staff? This is pertaining to SBIR, STTR eligibility, I guess. The other flavor of the same question was asking specifically about facility security clearances.
Okay, so we do have the ability to have SBIRs that do have classified work associated with them, but it would be very specific to that contract and likely wouldn't occur until phase 2. So while it is not a requirement for each SBIR, there are some that do go that route. But it would be, again, it would be very specific to that contract and probably later stages of the research and development. And it would be something that would be worked out very specifically with your government TPOC for that effort, and something that you would know about well ahead of time.
Excellent. Thank you, Mrs. Wigman. And next one over to Mr. Archer. So is the not to exceed amount of 1.8 million a newly expanded funding level? I feel like it used to be 1.5 million.
Yeah, that's thanks. Yeah, that's an easy one. That was just raised. As a matter of fact, I believe last year, I think it's 1.838 million for a phase 2 award. So if you do get one up to that, then you can actually get another one up to that for a second phase 2. I think when I came on board, 5.5 years ago, you're exactly right. It was like 1.5 million, and then it's gone up, $100,000, $150,000 a year since then. And that's something that is set by the Small Business Administration. Over.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Archer, if you don't mind, we'll stick with you for this next one too. Can you receive a firm fixed price for a phase 2 or a phase 2.5?
My contracting officer is going to be mad at me, but yes. So and you'll see this wording in the BAA, right? So we typically do cost plus fixed fee for a phase 2. However, that's not a hard and fast rule. We can do a firm fixed price, but I'll say a couple of things about that. We encourage cost plus fixed fee because that's how most of the government does its business, right? And so as the SBIR office, we're trying to help, grow you into doing greater and better things with the Navy. And so we try to bring that along as quickly as possible. Another thing is, cost plus fixed fee allows the government to assume some of the risk of the project, right? So if it is research and development, it's science and technology. And so while firm fixed price efforts work great if you're buying 100, widgets, we have found in the government that, cost plus fixed fee allows, if something doesn't go exactly as planned, and when does it, when you're doing research and development, that the small business doesn't have to assume the burden of if there was a cost overrun or things didn't work out quite the way we had hoped. So the answer to your question is we do on a case-by-case basis. NAVAIR will consider firm fixed price phase 2 awards. Over.
Thank you, sir. And I think the last one I have prepped here, I think I'll start with Ms. Wigman on this. How are projects socialized within the program offices and PEOs for advocacy? Is your office involved in that activity, or do you encourage, whoops, just lost. Oh, apologize. When Teams refreshes, it throws my text elsewhere.
I think I get the gist of the question, and I'm happy to go ahead and start answering it. And then, Jeff, if you find that I totally missed the mark, you can let me know. So there's 2 aspects to this. So how our topics are, so the topics that we advertise are directly selected by the program offices. So every topic that we put forward has a sponsor that is one of our PEOs and one of our PMAs that have endorsed it and are behind it and support that topic going forward. That's how we make sure that our topics tie back to our requirements and ultimately have a transition sponsor. But then also once the SBIRs are active, once we're talking about active contracts, yes, we are involved in that. We do have portfolio reviews every year with our PMA advanced development leads, where we go over their entire portfolio of projects. So what are the projects that what are the active contracts that they have that are going on? We confirm with them that these are still projects that they support so that we have some time to find an alternate sponsor if something has changed with the requirements for their program. And it also gives us an opportunity to identify which of those if we're talking about phase twos that are entering in their second year, we take the time to work with them to identify which of those contracts are perhaps eligible for one of those CRP options that Mr. Archer has talked about, or a transition or demonstration event. We try to identify those as well. So while primarily that is the responsibility of the PMAs to be aware of the portfolio and to know what they have funded through our program, our office is very much involved in that process and helping to make sure that the TPOCs and the PMAs are forming those relationships so the TPOCs can also be good advocates for your project. Did that answer it, or was there more to it?
I believe that was it, Christy. Thank you. And I did manage to find one other question that seemed to got buried here. So we'll stick with you, Ms. Wigman. Can a company that leads an effort have teaming partners as the overall team?
Yes, absolutely. So as we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, there are limits. And the limits are different for SBIR and STTR. In SBIR, there's limits on how much the small business needs to do, but they can absolutely have partners to fill out the rest of that work. And those partners do not need, they can be other small businesses, but they are not required to meet the small business requirements. In STTR, you have to pay specific attention to making sure, you know, the small business has to do 40%, the research institution has to do 30%. But obviously there is another 30% left over. That could be work that is being done by the small business, by the research institution, or a third partner who is working on that project as well. One thing to think about though, especially with STTR, when you're proposing is those percentages also persist into phase two. So often it's easier to find the work for the research institution in phase one to do that 30%, but making sure that you are also working in such a way that you also have the work for that research institution to continue doing into the phase two contract as well. But yes, to answer the question, yes, you can absolutely have partners as long as you're making sure that you're still meeting those minimum percentage of work requirements, which are always in the BAA.
Excellent, thank you. And there were a couple questions that I just found too related to a link for the Navy launch sign up. So I don't know if that's something that we have handy, but we could certainly make sure that it gets out to the folks, right?
Yeah, there is a link. I can definitely, I don't have it ready to be able to type in, but I can make sure it gets included. I know they mentioned that all of the questions will be published, and any answers that we weren't able to get to today will be published. I will make sure it's included in there. It's not necessarily a link to sign up. It is a link that will provide you with more information on the program, as well as a recorded Q&A session on the program that was done just a month ago. So that'll give you more information. You actually can't sign up unless you're invited, but all of our active phase two contracts should have received an invitation. So if you have an active Navy phase two contract, you should have received that. If you do, and for some reason you don't think you got an invitation, please email that navair.sbir@navy.mil, and we can work with the Navy to figure out why there may have been a miss in there. So there really is no place to sign up. You have to wait for that invite, but I will absolutely share the site that gives you more information on the details of the program.
Excellent, thank you. Just got a great question in. Great for Mr. Archer. It is, can you go from STTR to SBIR?
The short answer is yes. The policy directive, and it's also usually in every BAA that the Navy puts out, does give guidance on converting, I think is the word they use, SBIR to STTR, or what more usually happens is STTR to SBIR. So yes, you can absolutely do that. You just have to make a good case to your TPOC and to the Systems Command Program Office, SBIR Program Office, and they'll take a look at it, and then there'll be some things that they'll have to do with the contract vehicles and the funding, but yes, you can convert over.
Excellent, thanks. And just one note on websites, there were a couple questions in there. I guess perhaps one of the slides had listed the DSIP site, the SBIR information portal, as being defense.sbirsttr.com. A couple folks pointed out that didn't work. We did, the link was correct in a subsequent slide, but perhaps there was an earlier slide with the wrong link. But that one is DoD.SBIR.STTR.mil. Just wanted to point that out. And I think that's all of the questions that we have prepped here.
All right, well, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Please feel free to follow up with any questions that you have for us. And thank you for your time. And is there anything left, Mr. Butler or Ms. Watts?
Thank you all. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for handling the Q&A. And thank you to all the participants. Definitely reach out to us for any future questions. We'll follow up with the questions that we did not get to, and definitely fill out the surveys. Thanks again for joining us in today's webinar event. And that's a wrap from NAVAIR. Over and out.